Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another fabulous episode of the Healthcare Trailblazers Podcast. I'm excited to be sitting here today with Dr. Patrick McGill. Dr. McGill is the Chief Transformation Officer at Community Health Network. And just from the past 30 seconds of asking him what he does a whole lot. So excited to kind of dig in. Dr. McGill, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Appreciate the invitation and very excited to be talking to you today.
Let's talk about Community Health Network. Sometimes I start from the beginning, sometimes I start from the end. Let's jump into the present. Tell me a little bit about just the network in general, maybe what makes it unique, and then some of your work there.
Yeah. Community Health Network is a not-for-profit health system based in central Indiana, headquartered in Indianapolis. We've been around about 65, almost 70 years, and really have that mission of serving the people in the community or the communities that we serve. We have about 1,500 employed providers, 9 hospitals. We're the largest provider of behavioral health services. We're the market leader in oncology services. We have a partner membership with MD Anderson for cancer. Our North Hospital delivers the most babies of any hospital in the state. We have one of the largest primary care networks. And so when you think about, we do everything across the board except transplants and pediatric subspecialty.
Okay.
So when you think about the care that we deliver, we really have focused on the patients that we serve and addressing their needs, whether it's, across the whole continuum, birth to death.
That's incredible. That's really incredible. And, as I'm sure we'll talk about, but when you try making a difference, when you try taking on some sort of risk, you try moving in a value direction and whatever that might mean, having ownership over the full spectrum is so critical, so key to be able to actually keep the patient in that ecosystem. So,
absolutely.
How long have you been there?
Been in community for about 15 years. I was with another health system for about 6 years before that, just practicing as a family physician. Came to community in 2010, and I was just a practicing physician then.
Cool.
Primary care. We installed Epic in 2012, and I got involved after the installation for optimization. I was one of the busiest primary care doctors in the network, and I really wanted to get involved because I didn't want this EMR thing that everybody's been talking about to really kind of screw up the care that I was delivering to my patients. And so I got involved, and then from there it just has evolved ever since.
That's awesome. So I actually want to double click on that for a sec, because switching over to Epic or moving over to any EHR is such a painful process. What are some pieces of advice or some tips that you can give to a health system? Like, I have a client going through this right now. It's just really painful. What are some tips or advice that you can give to try to make such a process as painless as possible?
Yeah, I think there's a couple pieces of advice that I would give. One is, it's the old adage of understand your processes, because just installing a technology on top of bad processes it'll just shine a bright spotlight on your bad processes and make it painful for everybody. So you have to go back to the basics about understanding your processes, understanding what people do. Never underestimate having the end users, the frontline caregivers at the table for your conversations and decisions. They know how the systems work. They know the processes. They know the pain points. And so if you go out and talk to them, they will be happy to give you any number of pain points that need to be solved.
That is,
I think the third thing is, it's not a one and done, right? This is a new way to do business. It's a new way to deliver care. And oftentimes people fall into the trap of, well, we're going to install this technology, and then, on day one, all of our problems are going to be solved. And I think you have to see this as continuous improvement. And that's the approach that you need to take with any large technology installation, whether it's an EMR or something else.
Wow. That was really, really well said. I particularly love point number 2, because I think it's something that so many people forget. At the end of the day, these deals are signed by executives. And so very often the technology is built for the executives. And then the actual end user, it's not a good experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what are you started rattling off a whole long list of things that you're kind of on top of. Let's dig into to a couple of those. What are some of the projects that you're really proud of that you're involved with right now?
We have any number of projects. So we recently stood up a personalized medicine program, and so that focuses on high-risk genetic testing, early detection of cancer, really bringing all of those under one umbrella. I'm happy to say we're the first site for the GRAIL REACH trial, which is an early detection of cancer, real-world evidence study for GRAIL, the Gallery blood test.
Wow.
So we're very proud of that. We're doing that in primary care. We don't typically do research in primary care. And so we're proud that we were the first site in the country to launch that trial. I think that's really going to transform how we detect cancer early and then change the trajectory of treatment. We've been very successful with our Epic installation, or Epic utilization, I should say. Been on Epic for about 13 years. This past year, we were the only organization in the country, the only Epic shop to achieve 10 stars, which is how they measure, the utilization. But not just 10 stars, but 6 MyChart diamonds. So they have a different rating system for how you leverage MyChart or patient engagement. So we're the only organization in the country to achieve 6 diamonds. And so what that shows is our commitment to digital transformation, that patient experience, making it frictionless or removing friction. And that's really one of the hallmarks of our organization is we have an incredibly high patient experience. 95% of patients across the board rate us a 4 or 5 on a 5-point scale for their overall experience. And we're very proud of that. And therefore, we're very committed to understanding that patient journey and what are the friction points along that patient journey. So I think those are probably the biggest 3. I mean, we could talk about dozens and dozens and dozens of projects that we're working on, but in the last 6 to 9 months, those are probably the biggest 3 that I'm most proud of. And
That's
I'm most
awesome.
proud of the team, really. We have 800 people in the Office of Transformation that wake up every day trying to transform care and deliver our brand promise, which is exceptional care simply delivered. We have 16,000 caregivers in the organization that do that. And I'm very proud of the teams that I work with. That's
incredible. Wow. Let's talk about the patient engagement for a second, because I think that that's so rare. I mean, it is so rare. And something that I like to talk about all the time is that, you can have great strategy, you can create better media, you can create more colorful brochures, you can like try to do a lot of things, but if you can't get the patient in the conversation in a real way, if you can't get them on board and engaging in a real way, then you're not going to win, right? So what do you think some of those secrets to your success are? What do you think some of those, what are some things that you're implementing or doing differently that you think is creating that high level of patient engagement?
Well, it hasn't always been that way. So 10 years ago, our patient experience scores were at the other end of the spectrum. We're at the bottom. And I think that the secret that we took on was focus. And so we put some focus, and I have to give credit to our chief physician executive, Dr. Ram Yaleti, who at the time said, this is unacceptable. We're going to be at the top tier for patient experience. And so we put all the levers, to be able to make those changes. And so the first thing I would say is focus. It can't just be one more thing that you do. And we're not just talking about HCAHPS or other things. I mean, I'll give you an example. We measure access, and a lot of health systems measure access in a lot of different ways. Third next available appointment, time to get, lag time or lead time to get to your appointment. This is our second full year of measuring it this way, but we measure access for our annual incentive plan by asking the patient, did the appointment you receive meet your needs? So, they may say, I only have Fridays off. I can only come in on Friday. But if we're offering them a Monday through Thursday appointment, that's not meeting their needs. We can look really good on a third next available and not meet their needs. So it's really the voice of the customer becomes so important in many other things that we do. We measure. And so what we've seen with that is that scheduling experience and the meeting their needs at the appointment time has a statistically significant impact on what their overall experience is when they come into the exam room, into the procedure room, whatever it might be. So I think it's fundamentally thinking about that journey, and it is a longitudinal journey. It's not just a bunch of transactions. It's a journey that people are on.
I love that. And then that's so true. I mean, if you're, taking off work in order to get to your appointment, then you're going to be super stressed. And if you, God forbid, have to wait an extra 20 minutes in the waiting room, you're sitting, itching to get out of there the whole time. And then you're rushed with the doctor. And then, that's a really good point. That kind of frames the entire experience. It's just making sure that the actual time was convenient for them.
Yeah. And did it meet your needs? Did it meet, and if it doesn't meet your needs, we ask the question, why? Was it your schedule, our availability, our provider schedule? What was the reason, so that we can start to dive in and understand really what that experience is with scheduling. That's just one of dozens examples of how we measure that. We measure experience on the check-in experience. So how did it go for the check-in? Online, if people are booking appointments, but they failed to book, we actually ask them, why did you not book an appointment? Because oftentimes we can pat ourselves on the back with what we call the winners, the people that actually come in for a visit. But we need to understand the people that are not booking appointments. What is that? And so we've recently started to look further into segmentation and understanding from a health equity standpoint, what are different segments of the patients we care for? What are their needs, and are their needs that are not being met, whether that's language or cultural or whatever else it might be.
That's awesome. And what's the platform or the medium for this communication with the patients?
Yeah, we're a Qualtrics enterprise customer. We shifted to Qualtrics several years ago because we wanted to be able to benchmark outside of healthcare and look at experience from not just a healthcare lens. We wanted to be able to compete with all the other experiences that people have throughout their life, like with Nike and Under Armour and Delta and all those types of things that people really, we want to bring that type of experience into healthcare. And so we transitioned in 2021 to Qualtrics. We use them. And the other nice thing about having a platform is that we can correlate patient experience to caregiver experience and then see that transition into our brand experience as well.
Yeah. I applaud and love that goal and mentality to try to level up the healthcare experience to be on par with other experiences. I think it's something that so many people don't even think about, because healthcare, people just stay in the healthcare bubble, and then this is the good and this is the bad, and you try to be somewhere in between and forget that healthcare is just one of many experiences. And that goes across the board for healthcare, even small things like, I was just telling you about conferences, something that even at conferences, the topics at healthcare conferences can be pretty boring, but then most conference people take that to mean that the people are also boring and the people are not boring. They're regular people, right? And the same thing goes for patients, obviously. But to me, obviously, some of the biggest challenges, there are some really inherent fundamental challenges in healthcare when you're trying to level up that patient experience, typically around regulatory and, just HIPAA compliance. And you can't just it should be as easy as just texting somebody or WhatsApping somebody or video calling, but there's some pretty significant challenges. So how are you navigating those fundamental challenges to try to level up the experience to be like a Nike?
Yeah, so I think it starts with we believe it starts with three core components. One is know me as a person.
Okay.
Which is know my likes, my dislikes, my preferences, the things I don't prefer. We often say we run a business, and this is where the experience in healthcare is so important and much different than other experiences like retail or banking or other industries. We run a business that's open 365 days a year, 24/7, and 99.5% of people don't want to be there. Unless you're having a baby, that's about the only positive experience or a reason why you want to be in the health system. Otherwise, you're having surgery, you have an injury, you have an illness, you have cancer, you have some other reason that you don't want to be there. So how do you overcome an experience out of the gate, or an industry out of the gate where most people don't want to be there? So it's know me as a person. The second is respect my time. So again, goes back to our appointment choice. Like you mentioned, wait times in the lobby, wait times in the ER. How do we make that experience as best as we can, right? We know that just inherently when you're sick, when you've got cancer, or you're going through treatments, it starts off on a bad foot, but how do we at least make it the best experience that we possibly can? And then try and make it affordable to the best of our ability. So I'm happy to say we're a market leader in price estimates. We've probably a national leader in price estimates. When you look at some of the Epic data, we were one of the first ones to that. We have a central pricing office that has been in existence before the regulation came out. So how do you make it affordable to where at least it's transparent so people know how much it's going to cost them to have the care delivered? And I think if you start with those three pillars, then you can build on a lot of different things.
That's a really, really good framework. Yeah. Did you come up with that? That's pretty good.
I think we came up with it as a team.
Teamwork.
But that's our working premise. That's
awesome. And you guys seem to be pretty ahead of the curve and kind of doing your own thing around innovation, and which is awesome. You're not following the markets. You're trailblazing. What's your take on the state of AI and any kind of AI tools, and where are you guys at with that? Where's your head at?
We're very bullish on AI. We know that, but we still believe that there has to be humans in the loop. At the end of the day, healthcare is still humans taking care of humans. And we know that that's not going to change in the near future. But are there things that we can leverage AI to make it more efficient? So again, how can you leverage AI on that know me piece? I mean, we have a lot of data on the people that we take care of, and can we leverage AI to make it more personal and take some of that work off the plate for our providers and our sorry, my dog.
No,
for our providers and the patients that we serve. So we're very bullish. We also realize that AI in healthcare is probably at the peak of the hype cycle, right? The hype curve. And we know that we're at the peak of inflated expectations, and it's going to be coming down that curve at some point. But we believe in the premise that health systems that leverage AI will be far ahead of the curve of the health systems that don't leverage AI. And so we're very bullish. And so we're looking at clinical uses. We've had a lot of success with ambient documentation over the last year.
Which one are you? Are you guys with Bridge?
Yeah, we have an incredible partnership with Nuance.
Nuance. Nice.
And we've been using that. I can tell you personally, I still see patients. And so the one day a week that I see patients, ambient listening has been probably the most dramatic innovation in the last decade.
Yeah.
I mean, it's changed everything about how I have that experience in the exam room. So we're very bullish on those types of tools. We've got some back office tools. Obviously, in RevCycle, we've had a lot of experience and success with AI in RevCycle. But now we're looking at some of the more corporate functions, legal, HR, finance. How do we use AI, IT? How do we use AI in those functions as well?
Yeah. Tell me about the RevCycle one a little bit, if you don't mind. What's the use case? And
yeah, so we've been using AI for prior authorization and denial management, obviously clinical documentation improvement using AI, and now going down the path of autonomous coding. Those are those functions. A lot of things in RevCycle are routine and repetitive. So how do you use AI to allow the humans to interact with the exceptions versus 99% of the things that are routine? So we've been very bullish on AI and RevCycle for many years now.
That's awesome. What you seem to have just really good mindset about it. What would be a piece of advice or framework that you might give to other executives and other health systems on how to approach the subject? Because some people they don't want to be first, they don't want to be last, but they don't know where they fall. And some people are just, well, what if regulation comes out? And other people are like, so what's what's some advice that you can give to other executives on how to even approach the subject?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One is it takes a lot of courage, right? So you have to be courageous as a leader. You have to make some tough decisions, and you have to place some bets, and you have to have the infrastructure to, when those bets don't go as planned, be able to pull them back. And I think that creating a culture and an infrastructure where you can place some bets. I was actually having this conversation the other night with my wife. I love Annie Duke, the former poker player, and she wrote the book Quit. And, sometimes quitting is not the end of the world. And I think you have to know when to quit and when to fail and fail fast. And it's those adages. But you have to have the infrastructure. But you also, as a leader, have to have the courage to be willing to quit and be willing to fail and move forward and learn from that. The second thing I would tell you is that kind of piggybacks onto that is you have to be willing to develop a culture where you're not afraid to experiment, and you go and understand. It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. You have a culture where you understand the problems that people are dealing with every day and address those problems. I think oftentimes you see technologies come in that are looking for a problem to address. And I think that's where people get a bad taste in their mouth, or they get sideways. It's let's identify the problems and then go find the technology to solve those problems.
I think that your number 2 feeds number 1 very, very well, because I think the biggest challenge with people trying to execute on point number 1 that you mentioned of being willing to, it's not just be willing to fail, like have that built in, that understand that not everything is like a binary decision of success or failure, and being able to be comfortable with saying, let's try something and then pulling it back, like you said. I think that the reason why probably most people are not able to do that is because they're in this hierarchy of leadership, and they fall somewhere in the middle or downwards, and they feel like, if they bring an initiative to the table and doesn't work out, then that's just going to look poorly. And so that's why I think that you're number 2 of like, you have to build a culture where everyone at every level feels that ability to be safe in, hey, let's try something, but also have the power to say, and if it doesn't work, we can pull it back, and that's not a big deal,
Yeah, my CEO, so I report to the CEO. When I took my previous job as the chief analytics officer back a number of years ago, one of the first things that he told me was, I know you're going to make mistakes, but as long as they're well thought out and good decisions, you're not always going to make the right decision. So I would rather have you lean towards a tendency to act than a tendency to be paralyzed and not act and not make decisions. So make decisions and move forward. And as long as they're well thought out and they're reasonable decisions, don't go do anything crazy. Don't go off the chain and do something, off the limb. But if there's well thought out decisions, but it turns out that hindsight's 20/20 and it's a wrong decision, fine. We all make those decisions as leaders. And so I've tried to instill that in the teams that I lead. I would rather you make a well thought out, in hindsight, wrong decision than make no decision at all. And I think a lot of times as I talk to other people across the country, I think oftentimes that's where people get stuck. They're so paralyzed or paranoid about making the wrong decision. And it goes back to the culture of the organization and the culture of their boss, the culture that their boss promotes. The premise, at the end of the day, healthcare is constantly, it's about change, right? We deal with change every day. I started practicing 20 years ago. EMRs didn't exist, or they existed, but they weren't around. They weren't widely implemented. Probably 2/3 of the medications that I prescribe today didn't exist 20 years ago.
Wow.
Many of the treatments that I prescribed didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Some of the tests, genetic testing that I use on people all the time didn't exist 20 years ago. So to sit back and think, I can't handle change, or changes in healthcare is not, we all have to deal with change and become change agents when it comes to healthcare, because healthcare is constantly changing. The delivery of healthcare is changing. Now, with that said, I think where people get frozen in decision is they try and predict where the change is going. And so the other, I was talking about this yesterday. Another book that I love it's by a guy named Morgan Housel, who wrote a book, Same as Ever. And I think if you start, and the premise of the book is focus on the things that don't change as the launching point to be able to address change. We spend all this time trying to use that old phrase I hate using, predict where the puck is going to be. You're going to miss that puck probably 90% of the time. Focus on the things that don't change in healthcare, and then go address and maximize the friction. So again, goes back to what I said earlier. At the end of the day, we're still people taking care of people. Start with that as your premise and then build around it versus trying to predict, is AI going to disrupt primary care? Is AI going to take over radiology? Maybe. I don't know that. But let's focus on the things that we can address today.
I love that. And to your earlier point, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I've been kind of trained on with my business mentors is same exact thing. The decision that you make does not matter. The only thing that matters is the why you made that decision. And if the why was healthy, then even if the outcome doesn't work out, that's fine. But if the why was unhealthy, then even if the decision did work out, you still messed up. Like you still did not do a good thing, right?
That's right.
But it's really important. I think that the key is people in positions like yours. It has to be top down. You have to create this culture, almost like, I feel like Wall Street or like traders have that kind of culture where like they're almost like expected to lose X amount of millions of dollars. And if they're not losing money on trades and they're not making these big bets, then they're worthless and they're thrown out, you know? And then I feel like you hear these stories where people join and then in their first week, they lost like $10 million and they thought they're going to be absolutely thrown out. And then they get called in and they're like, okay, great. You know, so now you've learned X, Y, Z. Kind of have to adopt that culture, but I want to hear from your perspective. How do you do that top down? So I absolutely agree with you. You have to create that culture. You're the person creating the culture. What do you do?
First thing is communicate. So we learned this and we started it during COVID, and it's been something that it stuck after COVID, and it's stuck. It's going to stick for the near future. Is we have a weekly meeting with all the people that report to me, but also many other people that need to be in the room. So ultimately, it's about 40 to 50 people. We meet virtually, and it's about transparency. It's about transparency about what projects we're looking at. This would be mostly IT, but it's also analytics and informatics and transformation. Everybody's at the table to hear the same story, the same why, the same information. It empowers them to go talk to their team. So the first thing I would tell you is communication. Second thing I would tell you is transparency.
With your team?
With the team.
What kind of transparency?
Transparency of what's happening. Transparency of successes. Transparency of failures. Transparency of everything else that's going on. So being transparent in that communication, I think, is important. The third thing is I take this very personally, but I'm right there at the elbow with all of them. So still practicing. I'm the first adopter of any technologies that we implement. I'm the first adopter of any new programs. This REACH trial that I talked about earlier, I'm the principal investigator. I have skin in the game as a leader for the success of the program, and I think people see that, and that they ultimately respect that. The fourth thing and the last thing is really casting and creating through communication and transparency and having skin in the game, but really articulating that strategy for where we want to go and what we want to be as an organization, remembering our mission and vision and values, but also working on helping people understand where they fit into that strategy. So I oversee a lot of technical teams, right? IT, analytics, informatics, people that are mostly working from home or working a hybrid situation. They're not hands-on taking care of patients. And so sometimes it's easy to say, what's my role in this organization? And so we've been very intentional to help draw the connection back to what your role is. And we call everybody at community a caregiver. So all 16,000 people, whether you touch patients or not, you have a role in taking care of people. And that may be that you keep the EMR up and running. Great. It may be that you protect us from cyber attacks. Even better. It may be that you deliver food to an inpatient room. That's awesome too. Everybody has a role in taking care of people. And I think we have to keep that top of mind all the time, or it's very easy to lose sight and have people feel like they become a cog in a wheel.
Yeah, man, I'm so impressed. You're like such level-headed, straight, clear thinking. I really appreciate framework people, like people that can break things down into principles and frameworks rather than here's a specific do this versus do that. I really appreciate it. So, just kind of the last couple minutes here.
Let me follow up on what you just said before
Please.
You ask the next question.
Yeah.
I think there's a time and a place for I need you to do this. And I think the other piece that I didn't mention was I often talk about clarity in that some of that communication. It is actually compassionate leadership. And so I need to be very clear with you what I expect. You need to be clear with me what you expect and need from me. That clarity helps. But there are times and places where you need to be direct and say, I need you to do this right now. It needs to get done in the next hour, or A, B, and C is going to happen. Yep. But that can't be all the time. And I think you have to understand as a leader, when's the right time to be, what form of communication and what you need. And I think that's where that weekly meeting with the leadership helps us to be, again, transparent around how the decision was made, what decision was made, what are the impacts of not making that decision or not acting, and again, back to the why, and helps people translate the why.
Yeah.
But clarity is probably that fifth pillar that I would talk about.
Yeah. And that's I think the thing that's running through everything that you say is like extreme clarity, which is great. I mean, look, I speak to a lot of health systems. I speak to a lot of people in positions like yours, and I think it's very rare to have such a cohesive, forward-thinking strategy. So many health systems just feel like they're so fragmented and they're so overwhelmed and there's so much going on and there's so many different pieces to the puzzle that don't work well together, and it just feels overwhelming, like they can't actually get a lot done. And I'm getting a very different sense from you. So
yeah, we talk about, people say all the time, form follows function, right? Or function follows form, whatever you want to say. So we put our money where our mouth is. And that's why we tied IT and digital and experience management to. So we didn't talk about it. I also have oversight of geriatrics, palliative care, hospice, home care, primary care in the home. We're standing up a hospital in the home program. That rolls up into transformation, because all of those things, remote patient monitoring, all of those things have a deep technical IT component, right? And so as we're pushing care in the home, marrying that to your digital transformation enterprise absolutely allows you to move quickly and break things down and go fast and deliver on that care. When I talk, and sure you do too, when I talk to other organizations, you're right, they're so siloed and fragmented that they spend all their time infighting about who's budget, who's leader, who's the decision maker, who's this, who's that, and they can't get the work done. We've made the decision, we're not going to do that. We're going to organize things together so that we can be fast. We're a mid-sized health system. We're about $3.5 billion of net patient revenue. We're not huge in today's day and time, but we're not small either. And so we can be a player on the larger scale and larger stage because of the way that we've organized ourselves.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Dr. McGill, this has been a fascinating conversation. I think we're going to get a lot of very good clips out of this because you're very concise with your words. You got a lot of these principles down. So I'm really impressed. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope that all our listeners can kind of listen to a lot of these principles and break them down and actually bring them into your workflow. Actually, don't just listen, but try to. This one, I do a lot of these conversations. This one is a very applicable conversation because there's so many principles. So for everyone listening, and definitely, find Dr. McGill at LinkedIn. Where else can people hear more from you?
Yeah, just LinkedIn. I'm pretty simple when it comes to social media. I don't have a huge digital footprint. Just LinkedIn. LinkedIn's the way to go.
Dr. McGill, thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks for having me.